Okay, so what's an imaginary number? An imaginary number is any number I such that I squared is equal to -1. What that means is that when we take the square root of I squared and we take the square root of -1, we get I is equal to the square root of -1. Now I want you to notice that we're only going to use the positive value of that. Okay, so if I is equal to the square root of -1, and then if you square that, right, square root of -1 times the square root of -1 is going to be equal to -1, which we have already said. But let's take it a step further. I cubed, we know that we could rewrite using our exponent rules this as I squared times I. And so we would wind up with -1 times the square root of -1, which is, of course, just -I. And finally, we can have I to the 4th, which, if we think about it, if I is square root of -1, let's do it this way this time, and we take that to the 4th power, we know that that's going to be 4 of these multiplied together, and we know that since we know that if we square it, we get -1, and we square it again, we get -1, and then we multiply those together, that means I to the 4th must be 1. Now these values are pretty important. So I want you to memorize them. We're going to use them over and over and over again. We can continue with our pattern, and we've looked at I squared, I cubed, and I to the 4th. If we look at I to the 5th, I to the 5th can be expressed as I to the 4th times I, and we know that that is going to be 1 times I, and so we get I. So I want you to memorize these. We can continue with this pattern a little bit, and we can say, well, I to the 5th is really the same thing as I to the 4th times I. We know that I to the 4th is 1, so 1 times I is simply I. I to the 6th can be expressed the same way, I to the 4th times I squared, which means that it's 1 times I squared, which means we get -1. I to the 7th will be I to the 4th times I cubed, which is going to be 1 times -I, or just -I. And I to the 8th will do the same thing. That's I to the 4th times I to the 4th, which is still just 1. I bet you can predict what I to the 9th will be, what I to the 10th will be, and so on. There is, however, a shortcut. If you want to predict, or if you want to discover what the actual value is of a power of I, you can deal with the exponent. For instance, we made a prediction about I to the 10th, but let's figure it out using this shortcut. We need to pull out I to the 4ths, right? And so we would do that. We could actually take the power, and if we divide by 4, we would get 2 remainder 2. That remainder tells us what we're going to wind up with. I to the 2nd, and I to the 2nd we know is equal to -1. Let's try it with something else. Let's try I to the 23rd. Well, we're going to take 23 and we're going to divide that by 4. We will not get a decimal value, but we'll have a remainder instead. 4 goes into 23, 5 times with a 3 remainder. So we wind up with I to the 23rd is really equivalent to I to the 3rd. And what is I to the 3rd equal to? Negative I. So it's a quick and easy way to get our answers. Why don't you try these? I'm going to pause for a second. So here are a few that I would like you to try. I to the 42nd, I to the 426, and I to the 384. Let's see how you do with this. We'll clear up any questions on Monday. Why don't you pause, figure these 3 out, and then check on the next page. And here are your answers. Okay, see you on Monday. Have a nice weekend.